Hello dear friends, this article is a mosaic of craftsmanship composed of paragraphs collected from multiple news items. Not all the economic news is good, but it is impossible to change the system without first going through a crisis, just as there can be no day without night. Everything is very twisted and complicated, so it's very difficult to understand the labyrinth in which we have been put. Opinion piece. The market's toughest month. Debt is reaching its limit. Bond supply fades. Oil could rise 50%. Supply chain worsens. 6 central banks control the world. Fed announces tapering is near. Eurozone finances have deteriorated. Investors flee China's stocks in panic. Financial system transformation will come slowly. Saudi Arabia's petrodollar withdrawal sets off alarm bells. Stock market remains artificially on the brink of collapse. Gold and silver to be winners as currency degrades. Afghan evacuees arrive in Spain in shock and disarray. Navy commander fired for video criticizing military decisions. Spain needs 15,000 transporters to avoid supply problems. Let's start. A rally in which stocks have doubled from post-crisis lows would be about to enter the worst month of the year for stocks as investors focus on a resurgence of the problem and how quickly the Federal Reserve plans to withdraw its easy money policies. Sometimes you must walk through the darkness before you see the light. The transformation of the financial system will slowly come into existence, so this process is not designed for impatient people. Debt reaches limit. Economists want Powell to keep an eye on the looming debt ceiling debate in Congress and a possible federal government shutdown that could pose a major risk to his plans to reduce bond purchases. Market leadership. With the S&P 500 up another 20% plus year to date, many active managers are finding it difficult to keep up as market leadership has bounced around more than usual. In mid-March, we will move to a new narrative, calling it the mid-cycle transition, the period when markets contemplate the maximum rate of change in growth and policy. Six central banks control the world. The fate of the world is now in the hands of 6 central banks: Fed, ECB, BOE, England, PBOC, China, BOJ, Japan, SNB, Switzerland. For decades, these central banks have taken control of the world monetary system for the benefit of themselves and their private shareholders. Central banks have totally controlled the financial system, printing money and extending credit that doesn't exist. Everyone knows that creating money out of thin air makes money totally useless. These bankers know that if you stand next to the printing press and get the money first, it has some value before it circulates, and this is exactly what they have done. Once the money gets to the people, it quickly devalues. But bankers are not only in charge of the printing press, but they also control the cost of money in the form of interest rates. By controlling rates, they are bypassing the natural laws of supply and demand, so they can print a limited amount of money and price it at 0%. The effect of this is a debt bubble that can never be repaid. Central banks are panicking now, and they are creating billions of dollars, euros, etc. Add to that bank loans and government debt, and we are in the tens of billions. It all started at the end of July 2019, when the European Central Bank warned the world that something was very wrong by saying we will do whatever it takes. A few weeks later, the Fed started making daily repos of $100 billion. This was the moment when the problems in the financial system began. Gold and silver will be the obvious winners as the currency debasement accelerates. Saudi Arabia has recently signed a military mutual defense pact with Russia, abandoning the old petrodollar agreement, which means that the rest of the nations could also abandon the petrodollar. This could cause a huge financial crisis. The military coalition would take over and a global shutdown would ensue. Once this happens, I believe the QFS would kick in and the new rainbow currency would go back to being backed by gold and other precious metals. Economic collapse. According to the Atlantis report, an epic economic collapse has already begun. Rational thinking and common sense have all but disappeared. However, everyone has become a millionaire. History will record that today the most used word was inflation and the second most used word was temporary. Now the inflation rate is calculated without including food and gas, the two largest areas of the economy. The actual inflation rate today, including gas and food, would actually be much closer to 12%. Companies like BlackRock are buying up entire neighborhoods, and is another reason prices are skyrocketing. They turn them into rentals and let the neighborhood decline as the tenants have no stake or ownership in the house. They leave it deteriorating, and these big companies do the minimum amount of maintenance so they can increase their profits. This time, there is no new and innovative technology to boost the economy, and there is already $28 billion of debt, so deficit spending is not a viable option. At some point, the piper must be paid, and the economic collapse will make the Great Depression look like a milder recession in the 80s. Economy. Fed announces tapering is near. Powell sets the stage. The Fed chairman signaled that the central bank may begin winding down its emergency bond buying program this year. Interest rate increases will be subject to tighter conditions. For months, the stock market has been artificially hovering on the brink of collapse. On September 1st, 2021, 7.5 million Americans would lose their unemployment benefits. Most of them were behind on car payments, leases and mortgages, and many were in foreclosure, which would affect related businesses, and this would be compounded when the stock market officially collapsed, along with the 95% loss of cryptocurrency. Dollar bars retreat. The dollar plunged recently after Fed Chairman Jerome Powell suggested in a speech that the central bank may taper its massive support for the economy by the end of the year, not as quickly as many had feared in the market. Bond supply fades. The supply of investment-grade bonds is expected to nearly dry up next week ahead of the US Labor Day weekend. Tech stocks hit record highs. Tech stocks hit record highs. Blue chip tech stocks on Wall Street hit record highs on Friday, posting their best level in 5 weeks, as investors cheered the lack of a clear deadline set by the Federal Reserve to reduce stimulus. Slowdown. High frequency labor market data indicate a market slowdown in employment activity in the August payroll survey week, suggesting downside risk to our forecast, wrote Bank of America economist Michelle Mayer. Emerging currency trades lose steam. Some of the year's best performing emerging market currencies may fall out of favor as the rationale for rate hikes to address inflation shows early signs of waning. Supplies. Supply chain problems worsen. Vindija Vakil, CEO and founder of Reselink, tells Matt Miller at Bloomberg Markets that the supply chain is extremely disrupted, and it is likely to remain so for the next 6 months at least. Spain needs 15,000 transporters to avoid supply problems in the future. In times of crisis, when the labor market is suffering, there are sectors that need more manpower than ever. This is the case of freight transport. This is an area in which women are gradually making headway. It is an area with a great need for workers. Specifically, in Spain, there is a need for 15,000 people to get behind the wheel of a truck. It is urgent to fill these jobs to avoid future supply problems. Natural gas source. The commodity hit a new 3-year high on Friday as Hurricane Ida approached and natural gas stocks responded. That's a chance for the past few months. Oil could jump 50%. Crude oil prices could be headed for a jump of 20 to 50%, judging by a bullish breakout pattern that suggests a big rally could be coming for an asset, and that's only happened 3 times for crude this century, an equity strategist told CNBC. Nearly $10 billion in student loan debt cancelled. The administration has been making announcements all year that it has cancelled student loan debt for select groups of borrowers, not everyone. Hurricane Ida lashes Louisiana. Hurricane Ida made landfall in Louisiana on Sunday as an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm, forcing those who didn't flee to brace for the toughest test yet of the billions of dollars spent to upgrade lives after Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago. The cyclone generates maximum sustained winds of 240 kilometers per hour, and it is moving northwest at a speed of 20 kilometers per hour. Europe. Eurozone finances have deteriorated. Despite negative interest rates and money printed by the European Central Bank, which allowed all Eurozone member governments to finance themselves, having gone nowhere, nominal GDP in the Eurozone is even lower than before the Lehman Brothers crisis. The Eurozone's largest banks are over-leveraged, and their share prices are questioning their survival. In addition, these banks will have to contract their balance sheets to comply with the new Basel IV regulations covering risk-weighted assets, which will be introduced in January 2023. And finally, we should consider the political and economic consequences of a Eurosystem collapse. It is likely to be triggered by rising dollar interest rates, which would trigger a global bear market in financial assets. The financial situation on highly in-debt Eurozone members would become unsustainable, and the very existence of the euro, which is the glue that holds the Eurozone together, would be threatened. China. Chinese millennials take the shine of gold. For many affluent young Chinese consumers, modern simplicity is gone and tradition is back when it comes to jewelry. Sales of gold bracelets, pendants, earrings and necklaces that draw dragons, phoenixes, peonies and other traditional Chinese patterns and symbols are flying among consumers, especially those in their 20s or 30s, helping to fuel a rebound in gold demand in the country after a slump. Investors flee scared out of China stocks. It has been a difficult year for investors in China, especially for those who forgot that it is still a communist nation with a government that can act unilaterally and change direction quickly and ruthlessly. After some surprising and very anti-capitalist moves in recent months, Chinese stocks are plummeting. China's market has fallen 20% in the last 6 months, while some of its biggest names have fallen more than 40%. China's anti-satellite weapons present a complex challenge. The CCP has continued to develop an array of anti-satellite weapons designed to overwhelm US assets in space. China's growing arsenal of space weapons includes missiles, cyber weapons, satellite jamming devices, space robots with grappling arms, and high-powered lasers designed to blind satellites from the ground as they pass overhead. Afghanistan. Taliban agreed to allow Afghans to leave. The Taliban will allow all foreign nationals and Afghans will travel with travel authorization from another country to leave Afghanistan, according to a joint statement issued by Britain, the US and other countries. US strikes Daesh militants in Kabul. A drone strike on Sunday hit a suicide bomber in a vehicle intended to attack Kabul's airport, as US forces worked to complete a withdrawal that will end 2 decades of military involvement in Afghanistan. Collateral damage. The Associated Press reports that at least 3 minors were killed in an airstrike Sunday on a vehicle in Kabul that US officials say was carrying several suicide bombers. According to Sputnik news agency, collateral casualties included 6 civilians, including 4 minors. State Department calls for immediate departure from Kabul airport due to a specific and credible threat. In a security alert issued early Sunday, the American embassy raised the alarm about a possible attack at Kabul airport 2 days after a suicide bombing killed some 170 Afghans, 13 US military personnel, and 2 British citizens. Marine commander fired over viral video criticizing military decisions. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller was until Friday serving commander in good standing of a Marine Corps battalion, but by the end of the day it was confirmed that he was quickly relieved of his post for his statements. In quotes, "I am willing to throw it all away to tell my senior leaders. I demand accountability." Close quotes. The lieutenant colonel said in Facebook video that already racked up millions of views on various platforms. gift to the Taliban. The administration and the Pentagon just handed the Taliban about $85 billion in high-tech equipment and firepower, all of which could be used against the free world. Blinken denies giving Taliban lists of Afghan American and allies. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken tried to refute reports that the Biden administration gave the Taliban lists of American and allies in Afghanistan, but then went on to say that he provided names of bus loads for their evacuees. Islamist repression. Taliban forces are making progress in imposing their archaic rule in Afghanistan. In Kandahar province, female voices have been banned from radio and television stations, and a former official reported the murder of a local singer. Afghan evacuees arrived with their clothes on and in a state of shock. They arrived with their clothes on, with a black bag and even with a plastic bag with their things. Many in a state of major shock. This is how the Spanish psychologists meet the Afghan families evacuated from their country on their arrival at the Torrejón Air Base, Madrid, where they begin the work of comprehensive accompaniment to alleviate the pain with which these people come. Macron will propose to the United Nations a safe zone in Kabul. France, the United Kingdom and Germany are working on a United Nations proposal aimed at establishing a safe zone in Kabul to allow safe passage for people trying to leave Afghanistan, French President Emmanuel Macron said Sunday. Taliban reject creation of a safe zone in Kabul. The Taliban on Sunday dismissed the idea of creating a UN-controlled safe zone in Kabul as unnecessary in quotes. Middle East. Israeli bombs Hamas sites in Gaza. An Israeli plane struck Hamas sites in Gaza early Sunday in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Palestinian enclave. 30 casualties in Houthi attacks on Yemeni base. At least 30 soldiers were killed and 60 wounded Sunday in Houthi attacks on a military base belonging to Saudi-led coalition forces in southwestern Yemen. Russia, Belarus plan massive military exercise against NATO in wake of Afghan defeat. Russia and Belarus have announced plans to hold a joint military exercise September 10-16 called Zapad 2021 that takes on added significance due to NATO's humiliation in Afghanistan and lack of confidence in the alliance among its easternmost members. And that is all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.